To start off with this chapter in this documentary, we decided to start with the 1850s and 60s. This is Paddington Station, one of the few National Rail terminus stations that dates back to 1854, which was opened by the Great Western Railway. Isambard King de Brunel wants his train to terminate at London Euston, but after a disagreement with Robert Stephenson, he decided to terminate his trains at Paddington instead.
Good morning from Paddington Station, where I'm about to do something a little bit exciting. So in this documentary, I'm going to be covering the full history of the Metropolitan line from its opening in 1863 to its constant expansion and upgrade works through to today. So, a little bit of fun fact about Paddington Station. Paddington Station was actually built by the legendary Isambard King de Brunel, which opened in 1854. But when he opened the Great Western Railway, he wanted this train to terminate at London Euston. But after a disagreement with Robert Stephenson, he decided to let his trains terminate at London Paddington instead. But the first thing that we're going to be doing in this chapter is that we're going to be riding the original route that opened in 1863, starting from here at Paddington. But was it actually called Paddington? No, this used to be called that.
And on to the tube, where we are going to start riding the original route that opened in 1863. The first part of the Underground opened on the 10th of January 1863, where the Metropolitan Railway Company ran and built 7 stops between Paddington and Farringdon. But this Paddington station was once called Bishop's Road, and the one that you just saw earlier on in the documentary was once called Parade Street. There are some stations on the line that used to have different names, as we'll see later. As I tapped in with my oyster, I headed down these set of steps and get ready to embark on an afternoon journey as we travel back in time. My lucky candidate for this trip is going to be a Circle Line train, so let's explore all of the stations on the original route that opened in 1863.
Station is Edgware Road. Change for Southern District Line services via High Street, Kensington.
Our first stop in this documentary is Edgware Road, which was named after the town of Edgware, and it has some English origins meaning Eggis, weir or fish weir, which also refers to a dam. But there are 2 stations called Edgware Road. The other Edgware Road, which was close by, was opened by the Baker Street and Waterloo Railway, which of course we know today as the Bakerloo Line that opened in 1906. But there's one station on the whole of the Underground that has remained the same since its opening. So here I am on a Hammersmith and City Line train about to make a special trip to Baker Street. Baker Street was kept originally as it is since its opening, and it was named after William Baker, a speculative builder who was laid out in the 18th century. The station itself was designed by Charles W. Clark, who was related to the ambitious American railway tycoon Charles Tyson Yerkes. But as of today, Baker Street is also one of those major interchanges, where 3 subsurface lines and 2 deep tube lines meet up and connect. Oh, and by the way, on the Bakerloo Line platforms, look out for these classic signs that represent a man called Sherlock Holmes and totally pulling it off. Next up, we have Great Portland Street, which was originally called Portland Road, but it had 3 other names. Portland Road, which was originally opened in 1863, Great Portland Street and Regent's Park, which was kept in 1912, and it was just changed to just Great Portland Street in 1933. Great Portland Street was named after a street that was built in the 18th century, in honour of the Duke. The northern part was known as Portland Road, which was recorded in 1793. Next up, we have Euston Square, which was originally called Gower Street. Gower Street was named after Lady Gertrude Gower, who in 1737 became a second wife of Grimsby landowner Lord John Russell. And this station is an out-of-station interchange with Euston, which opened in 1837, home to the London-Birmingham Railway. And Euston is still playing a crucial role in connecting Londoners to the industrial heartlands of the Midlands. Next up, we have my favourite, which is King's Cross. King's Cross is a major interchange where 3 deep tube lines and 3 subsurface lines all meet up and connect. Now you probably think that the original name was just King's Cross after the opening of the mainline station opened in 1852. But no, it was named after a statue of King George IV, which was made in 1836 and got demolished in 1845. St Pancras International was named after the Christian boy named Martyr Pancras, and the station was followed 60 years later, as Sean explains.
This one, on the other hand, was built by William Henry Marlowe. This is the station that he built and designed and created and kept and built in 1868. It was literally kept exactly the way it is.
But there was a proposal to have another station called King's Cross International. It would have been built underground, but unfortunately, they scrapped it.
The thing I do is lying down on the platform. But did you know that King's Cross and St Pancras International were very close to being combined into one whole station? And it would have been called King's Cross International. And what would have happened there is that it would allow Eurostar trains, if it was to happen, to go from Scotland all the way down to France. I remember they actually run on the Great North Eastern Railway that ran services out of King's Cross to add to some sort of like temporary replacements.
And so, with that out of the way, we took a trip on the Metropolitan line heading towards Farringdon, passing through the abandoned King's Cross Underground station. And shortly after we arrived into Farringdon, the times were very different compared to 1863 on how fast the trains were between Paddington and Farringdon, as Sean explains once again.
So now I've ridden the entire route that officially opened in 1863, gave me a great idea that because of the fact that in 1863 it takes 18 minutes to get from Paddington to Farringdon. Now it takes 12 minutes to get from Paddington to Farringdon. And I guess that's it. So the next chapter, we're going to be going a few stops down to Moorgate and a few stops the other way down to Hammersmith as the expansion of the Metropolitan line starts to slowly grow.
But before we head to Moorgate, let me tell you something about Farringdon. Farringdon was relocated in December 1865 and was renamed Farringdon and High Holborn in 1922, where the new building designed by Clark was opened. It was named after Nicholas de Farringdon, who was appointed Lord Mayor of London by King Edward III. And so, the expansion of the Metropolitan line begins. In 1865, the Metropolitan line was extended down to Moorgate in the city, and there's something that I should have known about Moorgate Station a long time ago. Is there something to do with a national rail operator?
Platforms 1 and 2 are still used by Circle, Hammersmith City and Metropolitan line trains. Platforms 3 and 4 are definitely in use for terminating trains, but if you look over there, you can see that there's Platform 5 and Platform 6. What are those used for? Well, those are the platforms where Thameslink, yes, Thameslink actually used to run here. Thameslink services ran from Barbican all the way down to Moorgate. Due to the Thameslink programme, there was like a reduced service in 2003 and the station was no longer served by Thameslink trains until 2009.
The widened lines came into fruition in 1868, and in 1865, when Moorgate Station opened, it was originally called Moorgate Street, but got changed to just Moorgate in 1924.
This is the semi-fast Metropolitan line train to Cheshire. The next station is Barbican.
Shortly afterwards, we boarded a semi-fast Metropolitan line service as we headed outside of central London, heading to two specific stations that opened in 1864. I changed onto another subsurface line at Edgware Road to take me down to Hammersmith.
See right there, if you look over there, this is the Studland Road Viaduct. This is the Studland Road Viaduct. Just passed through the Studland Road Viaduct that is over there. That part of it is still used by District and Piccadilly line trains. The other half is still not in use, and that is where the old Grove Road station at Hammersmith used to be. What's that? Where's the Grove Road station at Hammersmith? Let me tell you.
Hammersmith Grove Road was a station that opened in 1869 by the London and South Western Railway, and a variety of trains stopped there, including Metropolitan line services, meaning that trains that came from the branch shortly after leaving Shepherd's Bush Market, it will link up with Grove Road Station to meet up with the District and Piccadilly lines. However, due to the competition from trams and the electrification of the Metropolitan District Railway, which is the competing company of the Metropolitan Railway, which we'll get into later, led to the passenger numbers declining drastically.
Hammersmith Grove Road got closed for a few years up until 1916, and if you look behind me here, you can see a small chunk of the viaduct that links to the station that is still there.
And shortly after that, we arrived at the original station that opened in 1864, Hammersmith.
We just arrived to our first destination that the Metropolitan Railway expanded to, opened in 1864. This is Hammersmith Station, which, funnily enough, was used to serve the Metropolitan line trains up until 1990. Because until 1990, the H&C didn't exist. It was part of the Metropolitan line. And also, one thing I also want to know is that, did you know that there's a secret connection that takes you from Hammersmith Station to Hammersmith Station on the District and Piccadilly line? Because there used to be like a subway that is now filled with Coke cans, and it's used to be dug underground. It'll take you all the way up to Hammersmith Station. That would have been such a useful route for so many people to this day, which unfortunately is not in use. But there is a caveat to that. There's also another viaduct that is located on this line. So, if you want to find it, take a Hammersmith and City Line or Circle Line train, a few stops down to Latimer Road, and look out on the left-hand side of the window, and you'll see there's another branch that links up to the original Uxbridge Road used to be. What's that? Where's the original Uxbridge Road station? Let me tell you once again.
That's right, there's another section of track that Metropolitan line trains use to link up to Latimer Road Station. If you go to Shepherd's Bush Station, which is served by Mild Main Line and Southern services, it's where a station called Uxbridge Road used to be, and there was a viaduct that will link up from Uxbridge Road to Latimer Road. Uxbridge Road came around also in 1869, and was served by the London North Western Railway up until 1940. But after we'd done our visit in Hammersmith, I took a ride to a station that is least served by London Underground trains, and it wasn't part of the Underground back then. So here I am, on a Mild Main Line train, about to make a special trip to Kensington Olympia. Kensington Olympia originally opened in 1844 by the London and Birmingham Railway, and it acted as a London terminus. It didn't become part of the Metropolitan Railway in 1864. And there's one thing that Kensington Olympia is really famous for: a motor rail system where you can actually get a car onto a train and it will take you to a random place around the UK.
You'll want the car when you're in Scotland, Cornwall or North Wales, but why not avoid the strain of a long drive by putting it on the train and relaxing in comfort till you get there? Kensington Olympia is the first motor rail terminal in the world. This particular station was chosen for the purpose because it connects with all rail arteries. The Cartic double-decker truck is not too high for mainline bridges or tunnels. When British Rail have enough of them, they will replace the car single-decker.
Sadly, you cannot get a car onto a train anymore, but it's been turned into a car park instead. But it's time for us to head back on the tube as we travel to our next station, which is South Kensington. But before we do that, let's ride this Mild Main Line train one stop for me to change at West Brompton. The line from Edgware Road, linking up towards South Kensington, which will take you via Paddington Parade Street station, opened in 1868. Now, I know you're here for the Metropolitan line only, but I need to go on a train that can help me change to the Jubilee line. What we're about to do is that we're going to be riding on the Metropolitan and District Railway, which for the very first time built their very own railway between South Kensington and Westminster. But before we head down to the Jubilee line platforms, I want to admire the District and Circle line platforms as well, and Westminster Station itself. Westminster Station makes me think that I'm in a space station with 17 escalators crisscrossing all over the place. As I head down onto the platforms, my train pulled in to take me to a station when the Metropolitan Railway extended north for the very first time, travelling from Baker Street to Swiss Cottage. Swiss Cottage was part of the Metropolitan and St John's Wood Railway. It opened in 1868 and the disused station got closed in 1940. And that's it. I'm done with the 1860s. But before we move on to the 1870s, there's something that I have to say. So now I've ridden the entire Jubilee line route that went from Westminster to Swiss Cottage. It gave me an idea that the original Swiss Cottage station that was dated back to 1868. The original one got closed in 1940 and a new one was built. However, Swiss Cottage Station is one of those few tube stations on the London Underground network to be named after pubs. Elephant and Castle is one of them, Angel, Swiss Cottage, Royal Oak and Manor House. Anyways, I think that's it. I'm going to go home and then we're going to be moving on to the 1870s. And now, we're in the 1870s, taking a trip on a Circle Line train to a station that confirmed that we are almost done, completing the entire circle. So I took a trip on the Circle Line, making another trip to Aldgate. Aldgate is one of those odd stations. It's a terminus for the Metropolitan line, and it's a through service for the Circle Line, but it's in central London. However, one thing I have to say about Aldgate Station is that it used to have these tiny pillars right here with the Metropolitan Railway branding that is right over there. And it makes me think that this may be the most New York-like tube station apart from Mile End, which is on the Central Line, and the Hammersmith City and District lines. I believe Aldgate Station is not the only one that has these types of pillars around. And also, one thing I have to say is that it's also the place where Metropolitan line trains actually used to step back. And it's a bit similar to like Morden and Brixton, which is where drivers can actually go to the end of the platform and press a plunger. But what is that? During the peak hours, to save the time that the driver has to walk towards the other length of the train, London Underground do something as stepping back. When the driver gets out of the cab, at the back, they press the plunger to let the front of the train know that it's clear and the train is ready to leave as soon as possible. And also, this happens not just at Aldgate, like other stations such as Brixton, Morden, as well as the Jubilee line, and several others. But I'm heading outside of Aldgate Tube Station, as I'm going to be telling you guys something that happened in 2005, and it was really serious. Aldgate is one of those odd terminuses on the London Underground because it's a station in Zone 1, and it's still served by Metropolitan line trains, and also served by the Circle Line as well. The Circle Line was almost complete, and now all we had to do is link up to Mansion House and that'll be it. This station came around in 1876 by the Metropolitan Railway and it was originally called Aldgate High Street. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, Aldgate is also the place where the July 2005 attacks actually occurred.
At 8:49 AM, 3 bombs on London Underground trains detonated within 50 seconds of each other. The bomb that I want to discuss about is the bomb that actually happened here at Aldgate. It happened on a Circle Line train, number 204, travelling east from Liverpool Street to Aldgate. Some of the carriages were actually damaged in the blast. The section of track that the Hammersmith City Line runs between Liverpool Street and Aldgate East was also damaged in the blast.
And it's time for us to take a trip on the Circle Line as we travel to another end of the line station that opened in 1877. The Metropolitan line also extended from Aldgate to Tower Hill, but I switched to a District Line train. This end of the line station, which not only shares tracks with its competing railway company, but also allowed access to meet up with older railway companies, linking Richmond to the wider railway network. As I travel on a District Line train, across the River Thames, we made it to the end of the line at Richmond. Richmond used to have a lot of railway companies running through here. The Richmond and West End Railway, the London and South Western Railway, the Great Western Railway, the District Railway, and the Metropolitan Railway. But before we discuss about that, I took a little walk to the River Thames, the Richmond upon Thames to be precise, and looks lovely. So I just made it to the end of the line at Richmond. If you didn't know, if you heard of the audio announcements on the District and Miles May line trains, Richmond Station is a national rail station, and Richmond was originally owned by the Richmond and West End Railway that opened in 1846, and I believe it terminated there after leaving Clapham Junction Station. And then in 1869 the London and South Western Railway came around, and in 1877, which is where we are in this decade, the Metropolitan District Railway and the Metropolitan Railway, two companies of London Underground lines, managed to connect themselves over around to Richmond Station. It is also important to know that Richmond Station is also the place where you can actually get services from the North London Railway, and it will take you around to the abandoned Broad Street Station, which acted as a London terminus from 1865 to 1986, and it also linked up to the abandoned Primrose Hill Station as well. The way how District Line trains actually used to get from here to Richmond to this day is that back in 1869, the North and South Western Railway link up a service that will link up to Turnham Green, and it will link up to Gunnersbury Station, which is served by the Metropolitan Railway and the Metropolitan District Railway, and it's also served by the North London Railway, which is now served by London Overground services. So Richmond, as of today, is in Zone 4, not Zone 6, and unlike Wimbledon and Upminster, it's not at any underground rounders at all, as the station isn't managed by TfL. London Underground trains depart from platforms 5 to 7. London Overground trains depart from platforms 3 and 4, and stopping South Western Railway services and fast services depart from platforms 1 and 2. And also, have you ever noticed that overground trains can actually use platforms 5 and platforms 6 and 7 at Richmond Station? I mean, whereas the overground trains can and sometimes use platforms 5, 6 and 7, the tube trains only use platforms 1 and 4. The tube trains can only use platform 4 that the overground uses, and not platform 3, as platform 3 does not have a fourth rail which tube trains require. Now it's time for my favourite part of the decade. We're in the 1880s, and the Metropolitan Railway continues to extend north from Swiss Cottage up to Harrow-on-the-Hill, but we are going to Harrow-on-the-Hill from Finchley Road. Finchley Road was opened in 1879 and was extended north from the close Swiss Cottage station, but it was originally used by Metropolitan and Bakerloo lines and trains, but we'll save that for another decade. But it's time for us to take a trip on the Met as we head up north, up to Harrow on the Hill.
Train to Watford. The next station is Wembley Park.
The Metropolitan Railway, even during its early times, had a mix of stops and fast services from Finchley Road up to Harrow on the Hill, a stopping service which stops at all intermediate stops, and a semi-fast service which skips some of the stations along the way. These services are still in use today, and if you want to catch a fast service, you have to get it during the morning peak, and if you want a semi-fast service, you have to get it in the evening peak. But we skip to all of the intermediate stops along the Jubilee Line route and proceed to head to stop at two stations at Preston Road and Norfolk Park, which didn't open back in 1880, but the company did run non-stop services from Wembley Park to our next destination, which is Harrow on the Hill. Harrow on the Hill opened in 1880 and was extended from the previous terminus station, Willesden Green, and was originally called Harrow back in the day, but got changed to Harrow on the Hill in 1894. You would also notice that services from London Marylebone are operated by Chiltern trains, but it was known as the Great Central Railway that came to this station in 1899 and ran services from London up towards Nottingham, Leicester, and even Manchester for that matter. And it's confirmed that this station is in the heart of Metroland. Metroland is a huge ambitious project that refers to the suburban areas that are in the northwest London and stations that are outside of London, but we'll save those for later. But all I can say is, Harrow on the Hill is the central part of Metroland and is 15 miles away from central London. But there's a station that we'll be covering very soon, which has an increase to the distance from central London by 10%. But the name Harrow on the Hill came from an early record that is used in 1938 as Harrow at a Hill. Following the opening of the station, the Green Hill was renamed to just Harrow, to prevent anyone from getting confused by the older village on the hill and the station. The station was designed by Leslie Green's sidekick, Stanley Hughes, the chief architect of London's transport, and the old UEIL company, but unfortunately the reviews of the station are now obstructed by new buildings and fences. For our next trip, we headed back into central London, as I heard that in 1884, the circle which will form the Circle Line was completed. This is Mansion House Tube Station. Mansion House was just served by the Metropolitan and District Railway, which opened in 1871. District Line trains actually used to go via the Great Western Main Line and went via a junction at Ealing Broadway Station to connect up to this station. However, this idea didn't create any income on customers, and the idea got scrapped in 1885. But in 1884, the Metropolitan Railway actually ran services thoroughly through the station up to Mark Lane Station, which we know today as Tower Hill. District Line trains used to terminate on Platform 2 before the tracks got removed in 2016, but the buffer stop is still in place. After taking a trip on the District Line to Mansion House, I also realised that Mansion House also played a crucial role of operating an inner circle service when the District and Metropolitan lines, yes, both of them, shared tracks with each other and jointly ran services from Mansion House to the abandoned Mark Lane station. Mark Lane was also opened in 1884, and that used to be the abandoned Tower Hill station until 1946, and the new one had to be built in 1967. The old one had to be shut down in 1946, mainly it's because it's the lack of capacity and it needs better facilities for the station. In fact, the only reason why Mark Lane Station existed was to replace the old Tower of London station, which got closed in 1884, surviving for just only 2 years. The Metropolitan Railway stopped using the station from 1882 to 1884, and the Inner Circle, which will now become the Circle Line, stopped using the station after 6 days of operation. For our next trip, we took a ride on the East London line and headed to a very specific station that has the oldest tunnel running under a river. So here I am at Wapping Station on the northern side of Brunel's famous Thames Tunnel. What do you mean you don't know about Brunel's famous Thames Tunnel? This one. The Thames Tunnel, which is 396 metres in length, or 1,300 feet tall, was built by Mark Brunel and his son Embark de Brunel. It was built in 1825, the same year that the Stockton and Darlington Railway ran. Rotherhithe Station is the southern side of Mark Brunel's famous Thames Tunnel. The tunnel was completed in 1843 and it was used as a pedestrian crossing and became a huge attraction for tourists. But a railway started running under here in 1869 by the East London Railway, which would be converted to the London Overground network. But the Metropolitan Railway ran services under the tunnel in 1884 as part of the East London Line extension from Aldgate East down to Whitechapel and to our next station that we're about to go to. The Thames Tunnel project was really expensive, and the initial investors withdrew their support after the second major flood in 1828. During that construction, Mark and Isambard both faced some difficulties building the tunnel. Flooding was the main point, as it's the first ever tunnel to be built underneath a navigable river, making it a high chance to severe flooding. Isambard King de Brunel almost got injured after he went down to investigate, but thankfully, he survived. But unfortunately, the severe flooding was the main cause as to why 6 people got killed during the attack. But after we explored the Thames Tunnel, we went over to our next station, which is New Cross. New Cross opened in 1839 and is where the East London Railway came in clutch with the London and Croydon Railway. On platform D, where the overground trains terminate, I was just admiring this CCTV camera, which has an underground roundel indicating that London Underground trains used to run here up until 2006, where the line was closed off to be rebranded into the London Overground network that we know today. But after we took a trip to this end of the line station, I decided to talk to you about some brief history about the Metropolitan Railway and this branch. This isn't the first time that East London Line trains actually used to operate on this line. It was dating back to 1869, where the East London Railway actually ran services between Attiscombe and Liverpool Street via New Cross Station, and in 1884, the Metropolitan Railway actually ran services from Aldgate East down towards New Cross. So if you go take a Hammersmith City Line train and heading up towards Aldgate East, you'll definitely notice the abandoned platforms of where the East London Line actually used to operate down to New Cross. Electric trains didn't operate on the Metropolitan Railway in 1884. In fact, the Metropolitan Railway actually used to operate with steam trains going through the famous Thames Tunnel, but didn't become electric trains until 1913, when the Metropolitan Railway actually used to run services between Kensington and Addison Road, which will later become Ken Olympia, and King's Cross. But before we head to our next station, look at the left hand side of the train and you'll see a Southeastern Class 375 train running over the London and Greenwich Railway. The London and Greenwich Railway is one of the oldest railway lines that are running in London to this day, which dates back to 1836, and it ran services between London Bridge and Greenwich. And just for the sake of it, I started a stopwatch on my timer at Rotherhithe Station, as I timed myself to see how long would it take to reach Wapping Station through the Thames Tunnel, and it's been confirmed that the distance between the two stations took about 1 minute and 10 seconds to reach to Wapping Station. 1 minute and 10 seconds. And it's time for us to go on the Metropolitan line, as we're going to go to Chesham, to my favourite part of this documentary. And now, it's time for us to leave London and enter Buckinghamshire. The Metropolitan Railway extended north up to Pinner Station, before being extended down to the next station, which is Rickmansworth, in 1887. Electric trains actually used to terminate here on platform 3. Want to know a genuine fun fact about Rickmansworth Tube Station? If you look over there, you can see that there's an abandoned platform 3. And what is platform 3 used for? Well, platform 3 is where steam trains used to carry on further and electric trains used to stop. Electric trains actually used to stop on platform 3, and you used to get off your electric train, go down some stairs to the other side of the concourse and carry on upwards towards Buckinghamshire. And whilst I was just admiring the scenery as we travel to our next station, which was really beautiful, especially on a hot summer's day, and that's why I recommend you travelling out this time of the year and not in the winter season, we made it to our next stop, which is Chalfont and Latimer, which was originally called Chalfont Road.
This is Chalfont and Latimer. This is an all-stations Metropolitan line train to Chesham. The next station is Chesham.
And this station is the last intermediate stop before we head down to Chesham. Chesham trains used to arrive on Chalfont on platform 3 as part of a shuttle service. Metropolitan Line A stock trains used to shuttle back and forth between the two stations, but since the new S stock trains have been introduced, this platform is no longer in use. Between Chalfont and Latimer and Chesham is one of the longest journeys that anywhere on the London Underground network, covering 3.89 miles or 6.26 kilometres. And it's the furthest station away from central London, 25 miles. And this station was built in 1889, 3 years before another station was built. But the Metropolitan Railway have actually plans to head north and meet up with the West Coast Main Line, but unfortunately, that never happened. And just after 10 minutes, we made it to the top left-hand corner of the tube map.
Please take your belongings with you when you leave the train. All change.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
This is Chesham.
But before we head outside the station, let's talk about some features that you might miss at Chesham. Chesham trains also used to arrive here on platform 1, but the tracks got removed a long time ago and decided to turn this into a garden, a winning garden by the 1993 London Underground gardening competition. And there's this old water pump here to commemorate the days of steam. But did you know that Chesham Station once had a goods yard here? Time to go and find it. One thing that is recognisable about Chesham is that Chesham's got a car park. It's just a car park. The fascinating thing about Chesham's car park, because this is where, I think this used to be, where the old goods yards used to be back in the 1960s, I think. Yeah, it's just turned into a car park, so anyone who's been to Chesham before may realise that this is just where the goods yard used to be. It's now turned into a car park. Chesham's goods yard played a vital role in the Metropolitan Railway's infrastructure, allowing for efficient transfer of goods between the railway line and the town of Chesham. It was also made to hold 500 tons of freight trains a month, covering agricultural goods and materials that people need for their community. Chesham Station itself has a nice character to it. In fact, all stations between Rickmansworth, Chesham and Amersham have their own unique Victorian architecture to it. And the reason why the Metropolitan line travels into the suburbs of Hertfordshire and Buckinghamshire, despite being a tube line, is because of the Metroland project, which allowed the area to grow by building more housing estates. The railway company continues to develop the area more and more to encourage more commuters who are travelling to Chesham to travel to and from central London. So welcome to the northern westerly point of the tube map, which is Chesham Station, very edge of the tube. It literally took us about 10 minutes to get from Chalfont to Latimer to Chesham, which is the longest distance between two stations anywhere on the London Underground network. And also, the Metropolitan Railway actually had some plans to extend the Metropolitan line much more further and to meet with the West Coast Main Line at Shring, but unfortunately, that never happened. In fact, the only reason why the Metropolitan line didn't go to Shring is because the landowners have actually stopped the line to making it go much more further. The line was redeveloped over the years, and the London Passenger Transport Board, or LPTB for short, wants to focus on electrifying the suburban traffic. And after we talked about that, I headed into the local high street. Stations beyond Chesham and Amersham and Chorleywood
are the stations that are actually built in 1889, but Rickmansworth Station was opened 2 years later in 1887, and it was originally part of the Metropolitan Railway. In fact, the Great Central Railway actually used to run services through here, and the Metropolitan Railway had plans to head up north, beyond Amersham, and meet with Aylesbury, Verney Junction, Brill, and so many other destinations, but that was cut back to Amersham.
But before we head to Amersham, I decided to take a look at Chesham Station Roundel again, which looks great, and then it's time for us to head to Amersham. We've travelled down the beautiful scenic views of Buckinghamshire, travelling down to our next station on the list, which is Amersham. Cheshire and Amersham are also one of those stations that are outside of the M25, and it's gotten up to a point where the single track branch line, which takes about 10 minutes, rejoins the normal line. And shortly after we get back on the normal line, we return back to Chalfont to change to head to Amersham. After we arrived at Chalfont and Latimer, I switched platforms to head to platform 1, which will take us to our next destination, but I'm just admiring this amazing Victorian architecture of the station, before I boarded my next train to take me one stop to Amersham Station. Amersham Station opened in 1892, 3 years after Chesham was built. It is also one of those tube stations that is the highest tube station above sea level. But when the zones were introduced, Amersham Station was originally in Zone D, as well as Chesham, but it got changed to Zone 9 in 2008. Metropolitan line trains actually used to go much further, as we'll see later. Metropolitan line trains terminate on platform 2, because it's the end of the line from the Metropolitan line now, because that's how the line used to go much further as new trains were bought in the 1960s.
So, some people say that Chesham might just be the most northern westerly station of the tube map. Is it the most northern westerly point of the tube map? No, because if you just saw that Metropolitan line train actually reversed into a siding for it to head back into central London, and also the Metropolitan line actually used to go much more further beyond Amersham towards Aylesbury and beyond, but it got cut back a few years back. Let me explain.
That's right, the Metropolitan Railway actually used to go much more further and connected with the Great Central Railway to stations like Aylesbury, Verney Junction, and even Brill for that matter. People who travel on Metropolitan line trains that went to Verney Junction, you will be at the furthest point of the tube map. You will be at the furthest distance away from central London, with a grand total of 50 miles. But after the electrification in 1961, the station between Amersham and Aylesbury was handed over to British Rail to allow children trains to run on it, and the Metropolitan Railway was cut back to Chesham and Amersham. And we're done with the 1880s. There are 2 chapters to go in this documentary. The Metroland project definitely provided access for passengers to connect to the countryside and for new housing estates. This also allowed the company to increase ridership of customers. So that will be marking at my end of my journey at the top northwestern corner of the tube map. That's Chesham and Amersham for you. So we're going to be heading back into central London as we got 2 chapters to go, as we're going to exploring more parts of the Metropolitan line, because some parts of the Metropolitan Railway have opened in the 1900s. We're in the 1900s, and more lines of the Metropolitan Railway were built, including this recent one that took place in 1904, where the Metropolitan Railway built the extension from Harrow-on-the-Hill to Uxbridge. All of the stations between the two were not built back in the time, and the only station that was built along the line was Ruislip. Ruislip opened in 1904 and was back then the only intermediate stop on this line. It used to run steam trains down this line, but electrification of the line took place in 1905, which will allow steam trains to retire from service and electric trains started to use the line. The District Line actually used to run services from South Harrow to Uxbridge in 1910, but the Piccadilly Line operated on the route in 1933.
This is Ruislip. All stations Metropolitan Line train to Uxbridge. The next station is Ickenham.
But after we took a trip to Ruislip, we headed to a station that is in the depths of Zone 6, on the northwest corner of the tube map, and a station that has its classic charm to it, and has been built by an amazing architect that we all know and love today.
The next station is Uxbridge, where this train terminates. Please take your belongings with you when we leave the train. Or change. This is Uxbridge.
And on to the end of the line. Uxbridge Station, to this day, is still served by Metropolitan and Piccadilly Line trains, which are every 20 minutes. The station itself was designed by the legendary Charles Holden, and he's arguably the best piece of architecture on the Underground. You may notice that the station roof is very similar to the other end of the Piccadilly Line, which is Cockfosters. Holden designed several stations on the London Underground network and became greatly listed in 1983. This station was opened to a new alignment, and this wasn't used to be where the original Uxbridge station used to be. The outside of the station used to be served by heritage buses until it was confirmed for this area to be pedestrianised. But to find the original station, we need to go to a local supermarket. Today's Uxbridge tube station was not the first one.
I actually managed to make it to a car park, the Sainsbury's car park to be precise. It's not the station car park because I'm nowhere near Uxbridge tube station because I just took like a 50-minute walk from Uxbridge tube station down over here. But if you want to actually go to where the abandoned tube station used to be, then this Sainsbury's car park, the old supermarket this is where the abandoned tube station used to be.
That's right, there used to be two abandoned stations around the area that was also called Uxbridge, and one of them was called Uxbridge Vine Street. Uxbridge Vine Street was served by the Great Western Railway and opened in 1856, and is one of the 3 earliest railway stations to be opening in London, which ran services from here down to West Drayton Station, with only one intermediate stop along the route, which is a station called Cowley. This line was a shuttle service which ran back and forth between West Drayton and Uxbridge until it eventually got closed in 1962. There was also a station that got closed 2 years later after Uxbridge Vine Street got closed, called Uxbridge High Street, which opened in 1907 and was located the south of Uxbridge Vine Road Station. This station was served by GWR and GCR services. However, some parts of the land of the area got purchased, which caused Uxbridge High Street to got suspended in 1920 and eventually got closed in 1964. So yes, when you make your own trip to Uxbridge, make sure to realise that this station that we have today was not actually the first one. The original Underground is where the supermarket is, but it has been turned into a Sainsbury's car park. However, it is time for us to head back to the station and make our next journey to a station that's abandoned and disused. If you've never been to Uxbridge, I highly recommend going there. It's a true Charles Holden classic, from the inside and out. And there you go, that is Uxbridge for you. So after we're done with that, it's time for us to head back into central London to visit another East London Line station. But this East London Line station is not in use, and it's an abandoned station on the East London Line. Let's do it. we went to Shoreditch High Street to head to a station that got closed in 2006 and it was part of the old abandoned East London line. I headed over to a local park and this is where the abandoned Shoreditch station used to be and the station building itself. How well do I know my abandoned stations on the Metropolitan Railway? This one that I visited to is a station that is no longer in use. Where I'm standing now, this is where the old railway lines used to run to link up to the abandoned Shoreditch station. And over there, this is the viaduct where the overground used to run over there. This is where the abandoned tracks used to go through. It went underneath a deep level cutting part and it went to the abandoned Shoreditch station, which is this housing resident over there. So, you probably might be wondering, what on earth happened to the abandoned Shoreditch station, and what is the history of this station? Let me explain. Shoreditch Station opened in 1913 and was the northern terminus of the original East London line, and was also part of the Metropolitan Railway. Shoreditch was one of the least used tube station terminuses in central London, serving up to a little amount of passengers. In 2006, Shoreditch Station on the East London line closed to make way to be converted into the London Overground network and serve the new Shoreditch High Street Station instead, which is now served by Windrush line trains, so it's in constant use with 7 trains per hour, always running throughout the day and into the night. So now we talked about the abandoned Shoreditch Station and how it got completely demolished in 2006. We're going to be going on one last journey as we're going to be going to a station on the tube that shouldn't really be on the tube map, but it kind of is, and a station that used to be the terminus of the Met. And now, we're making our second to last trip on the tube. This time, we headed to a station that was supposed to close due to a planned extension in 2016, but unfortunately, that never happened. And this station is at the end of the line at Watford.
Please take your belongings with you when you leave the train. All change. This is Watford, where this train terminates.
Watford Station came around in 1925 and it's a Grade 2 listed station with classic station entrance as well as these old chimneys for a nice touch. This station was almost called Ascot Road, but then it got changed to Cassio Bridge before having the official name at Watford. There was a plan to extend the Metropolitan line much more further beyond the Watford tube station, but didn't happen, and instead, this became the terminus. And there was also a plan to close the tube station to make way for another extension, bit how the Northern Heights was cancelled on the Northern Line. Locals around here just they don't call it Watford Tube Station or Watford Underground Station or Watford Station, but the locals around here call it Watford Met. But the thing about Watford Met is that this station is a station that shouldn't really exist on the tube map in the first place, as this station was actually planned to close as part of the Croxley Rail Link, which will connect up from Croxley up to Watford Junction. Because if the Metropolitan line actually did do that, Watford Tube Station, the terminus here, will be no more and it will be closed and it will come off the London Underground map. Let me explain. There's a plan to extend the Metropolitan line from Croxley up to Watford Junction. It will call at a new Cassio Bridge station before meeting up with Watford High Street on the Watford DC line before terminating at Watford Junction. It will connect via a bridge that should have finished construction in 2018, where it will go over towards Watford Junction instead. However, in 2016, the ambitious project was stopped in its tracks by the Mayor of London due to no funding of the project. However, there was an abandoned station on the line called Watford West. Watford West opened in 1913 and was on a branch from Watford Junction to Croxley Green, but got temporarily closed in 1996 before being permanent in 2003. All of the facilities at the station were removed in order to make way for the construction of the Croxley Rail Link, but work on the line was postponed and it was called off in 2017 due to the ongoing funding issue, and it became abandoned ever since.
But it's time for us to take our last trip back into London to head over to our last end of the line station before the takeover started to rise. So we took a trip on the Metropolitan line train southbound as we took a trip to Wembley Park Tube Station.
The next station is Wembley Park. Change for the Jubilee line. Exit for Wembley Stadium and Wembley Arena.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
To change onto a Jubilee line train to head over to our last end of the line station that the Metropolitan line railway expanded to at Stanmore.
This station is Wembley Park.
As we're slowly coming to a close in this documentary, I look back at the past few weeks and I realise that I've not uploaded a single video, mainly because I have to make a huge effort into making this big and ambitious project for all of you guys. But before we conclude this documentary, we head over to the end of the line. I definitely recognise that Stanmore Station is definitely recognisable for being used to called like Stoneleigh Mere or something. Yeah, something like that. And you probably might be wondering, seriously, has Sean lost his mind? No, because did you know that Stanmore used to be the terminus of the Metropolitan line? Let me explain. When Stanmore first opened in 1932, it was originally part of the Metropolitan Railway and Line, which is why the station building exterior was designed by Charles W. Clark. A competing company against the Metropolitan Railway at the time was the London Midland and Scottish Railway, which ran a shuttle service from Stanmore Village up to Harrow and Wealdstone. After 20 years in service, the line was closed off by British Rail in 1952. Stanmore got handed over to the Bakerloo line in 1939 and served for only up to 40 years until the brand new Jubilee line, which came to Stanmore Station, that opened in 1979. There was a plan for Metropolitan line trains to continue beyond Stanmore and meet up at Bushey and even built a new station called Elstree, but that never happened, and it's still saved in the Parliamentary London Passenger Transport Board New Works programme just in case if the extension came into fruition. After all of the closures of some lines and some takeovers took place on the route, we look at the Metropolitan line that we know today and just realise on how the oldest tube line on the London Underground network remains an icon from its enriched history and identity. This is going to be marking the end of today's documentary. This documentary might just be the biggest one in a while, if not ever. The Metropolitan line is actually very unique as one of the best tube lines ever in my opinion, from its Victorian architecture, to its abandoned stations, to its older stations that opened in 1863. And this project took about 2 weeks. That's right, 2 weeks for me to complete. And the only way that I can thank you guys so much is my local subscribers. If it wasn't for you guys, I would have probably wouldn't help the fact that I actually made this documentary. So again, thank you all so much. So why not take your own trip on the Metropolitan line, explore all of the amenities, and explore the heart of Metroland, because you know what they say? Child of the First War, forgotten by the Second. They call it Metroland, but we just went from Metroland to Metropolitan. Thanks for watching.